Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. We have a tight schedule, so I'm going to begin. I would now like to take the opportunity to preview the next conference for the National Guard Association, which will be held in the great state of Tennessee in the wonderful city of Nashville. Now, we had a great conference there in 2009. I can't imagine what we're going to do to top that, but I understand we're going to start with a video, so let's roll the video.
And he played Found a Mountain, Run, Boys, Run. Devil's in the house of the rising sun. The chicken in the bread fella picking out dough. Granny, where your dog bite, no child, no.
Hi, I'm Charlie Daniels, and this is where I hang my hat, Nashville, Tennessee. At Music City is where the Tennessee National Guard is hosting the 2015 NGAUS General Conference. I want to invite you to join us for some good old Southern hospitality, great music, lots of information, and a chance to see some old friends and make some new ones. Nashville has it all, so come on down to the Athens of the South. We'll be waiting for you.
Thanks, Charlie. Nashville does have it all. Music, history, culture, education, and tradition. From the Ryman to the Titans, from Broadway to the Hermitage, where business meets show business. Whether you're networking or not working, Nashville is the place to be in September 2015. If you're flying in, the Nashville International Airport was ranked among the 7 most entertaining airports in the world by CNN, and Nashville placed as the number 3 best convention city in the USA Today Reader's Choice Awards. Whether you're flying or driving, make Nashville your destination for NGAUS 2015.
Hello, I'm Governor Bill Haslam of Tennessee. I want to invite you to the 2015 National Guard Association Conference in Nashville next year. You know, Tennessee is known as the volunteer state, and for pretty good reason. We also understand that your hard work, sacrifice, and dedication make our states and our country strong. We're grateful for your service. You know, there's a lot to see and do in Nashville. Whether you're a fan of music, former presidents, or of great Southern food like me, I know you'll enjoy your time in Tennessee. We look forward to seeing you next September. Come to Nashville.
The 2015 NGAUS General Conference will once again be held at the Gaylord Opryland Resort. For those of you who were here in 2009, you know what that means. First-class accommodations in a first-class facility, and virtually everything under one roof. Spectacular atrium views, modern amenities, and world-class service. Discover sumptuous dining options at Gaylord Opryland's premier on-site restaurants and experience the best that Music City has to offer. Later, you can ride to Lynchburg and visit the world-famous Jack Daniel's Distillery on NGAUS's 2nd annual motorcycle rally. No sipping, though. Lynchburg is a dry county. If motoring down the highway is not your choice, hit the links at Gaylord Springs. Carved from the banks of the meandering Cumberland River and bordered by limestone bluffs and wetlands, Gaylord Springs golf links will test and enthuse you. Now, if world-class shopping is what you're looking for, over 200 stores are just a short walk from your room at the indoor Opry Mills Shopping Center, and you can dance the night away in downtown Nashville at the Wild Horse Saloon. You can also see what's on the cutting edge of military technology under the same roof and follow up the state's dinner with a private performance of the show that made country music famous, the Grand Ole Opry. Just like Charlie said, Nashville has it all. So plan to spend a couple of extra days with us when you come to NGAUS in 2015. Discover the perfect harmony of history, events, and attractions, all culturally intertwined with the music that defines Nashville. Mark your calendar for September 10 through September 13. We'll be waiting for you in Music City.
Hello, I'm Trey Hargett, Tennessee's Secretary of State, and I want to invite you to Nashville next September for the NGAUS Annual General Conference. We look forward to hosting you in Music City.
Y'all come on down to Nashville next September for the NGAUS convention, and I will see you there.
Come down to Nashville next year for August.
How about that? Ladies and gentlemen, the Adjutant General from the great state of Tennessee, my friend Max Haston.
Thanks, Don. Good. Thanks, Don. Well, on behalf of my boss, Governor Bill Haslam, and the 14,000 airmen and soldiers of the Tennessee Military Department, come to Nashville. The 137th General Conference will be held 10 through 13 September, and let me tell you, that's not on Bristol weekend. We made sure of that. But Nashville has a little bit of everything. We got music of every genre. We have shopping. We have historical battlefields, Franklin, Murfreesboro, just located a few miles away. So there's lots of stuff to do. The airport in Nashville is extremely convenient. It's hubbed by Southwest, American, U.S. Air, so it's easy to get there. We are in driving distance of approximately 2/3 of the population of the United States, a one-day drive. So there's no reason that you can't get there. And for those of you who ride motorcycles, I'm following the lead of my good friend Don Dunbar up in Wisconsin, and we're going to have a motorcycle ride from the Gaylord down to Lynchburg, Tennessee, where the master distiller, Jeff Arnett, will host a barbecue for us. If you're not a motorcycle rider, the Gaylord Links. It's one of the best golf courses in Tennessee, located very near the Opryland Hotel, and it's the former host of the seniors tournament. And right next door to Opryland is Opry Mills. Now, I'm going to tell you, when we were there in 2009, just a few weeks after, or a few months after the conference, we had a flood. Some of you may remember that. So the Opryland is completely redone. It's a different site from where you were there before. It's going to be a great time. We hope you all can show up and bring a buddy. See you in Nashville.
Thank you, Max, and thank you to Tennessee for the great host that you will be in 2015. We can't wait. The chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
General retired. Major General retired Arnold L. Punaro, the Chairman of the Reserve Forces Policy Board. He is escorted by Major General William D. Wolford, a member of the Reserve Forces Policy Board and the Adjutant General of Arkansas, and Major General H. Michael Edwards, a member of the Reserve Forces Policy Board and the Adjutant General of Colorado.
Will the Sergeant at Arms escort our distinguished guest and his party to the platform?
Major General retired Arnold L. Punaro took the oath of office as Chairman of the Reserve Forces Policy Board on September 12, 2011. The RFPB serves as an independent advisor to the Secretary of Defense on all National Guard and Reserve matters, to include advice and recommendations on strategies, policy, and practices to improve and enhance the capabilities, efficiency, and effect of the reserve components. A retired U.S. Marine Corps officer, he was assigned as the Director of the Marine Corps Reserve from May 2001 to October 2003. He served on the Reserve Forces Policy Board as a member from 1997 to 2003.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a distinguished combat veteran, commander, and has served this nation in Washington, D.C. in a very unique way. As the head of the Reserve Forces Policy Board, an independent voice of the Secretary of Defense, he has actually been an independent voice to the Secretary of Defense, often asking the tough questions and bringing the information to our nation's leaders that is the truth and what they need to hear. He is not only a friend of the National Guard, but much more importantly, a great patriot and a leader of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, General Arnold Punaro.
Thank you. General Grass, Danner, Tonini, Hargett, former chiefs, adjutants general, distinguished guests, soldiers, airmen, industry representatives, family and friends of the National Guard. I'm deeply honored to have the privilege of addressing your annual conference once again. As a U.S. Senate staffer starting in 1973, two of my frequent visitors were Major General Fran Greenleaf, Guard Bureau Chief and then the Executive Director of NGAUS, and Lieutenant General Vern Weber, who succeeded him in both jobs. As I look back over the last 40 years, it is clear to me that NGAUS has played a powerful and successful role advocating for a strong national defense. In the budget and policy wars in the decades ahead, NGAUS's role will be even more important. And if I could choose only one outfit to be in my foxhole, it would be NGAUS, led by Major General Gus Hargett. General Hargett. Well, it would be hard to imagine that so much could change so significantly in the 2 years since I last shared my thoughts with you all in Reno. But as we examine the defense and security landscape that lies before us today, I can't help but recall that great Charles Dickens' masterpiece, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. How could this possibly be the best of times, you ask? Despite all the gloom and doom in Washington these days, there is good news that gives us hope for the future. In the wake of the National Commission on the Structure of the Air Force, that service has new leadership in Secretary Deborah Lee James and Chief of Staff Mark Welch. They have brought a renewed vision that the Air Force is a single armed force, not a collection of three disparate components. The Army, meanwhile, recently swore in General Dan Allen, formerly Commanding General of Forces Command, as its new Vice Chief of Staff. General Allen has proven to be a strong believer in the One Army concept, as evidenced by his own statements and activities and by those of his senior staff members who have appeared before our Reserve Forces Policy Board. That bodes well for what we all hope will be a similar revival of a one-team philosophy following a commission on the structure of the Army that the Congress is very likely to establish. The language in the Senate and House markups of the 2015 defense bills that seeks to create that commission is the product of the attempts by some to alter the Army National Guard's role as a combat reserve of the Army and as an operational reserve for our nation. Our undeniably cost-effective reserve components must be part of solutions when it comes to decisions in this era of fiscal constraint. However, when the Army planned to take all of the Army National Guard's attack helicopters, despite reasonable alternatives offered by the Guard's leadership, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, and a strong cohort of their congressional colleagues stepped forward and declared that the Army had gone too far. All four defense committees agreed. I am confident that the Army, working with the Guard leadership and with the adjutants generals, will get it right. With innovative and team-building leaders like General Allen and Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, who is designing the Army of the future and will speak to you next, The Army that stood unified against our nation's enemies for more than a decade of war will remain unified into the future. I had the privilege of meeting with General McMaster at Fort Benning when my son Dan Punaro was commissioned as a second lieutenant in September 2013 and now proudly serves in the Delaware National Guard. Hoorah! General McMaster and I talked about the future of warfare. We are both grunts. We know history's proven lesson that boots on the ground are required to ultimately prevail in any serious conflict, and that the Guard's combat formations are essential to our warfighting abilities today and far into the future. Our nation desperately needs leaders like General Allen and General McMaster, and many more like them as we face a wide array of tough challenges. Ever-growing debt and deficit fueled by domestic and military entitlements, immigration, declining education, and decaying infrastructure. Add to those the rapidly deteriorating international situation, unrest, insurgencies, or open civil war in Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Egypt, Syria, Ukraine, East and Western Africa. One could very easily conclude that we are indeed in the worst of times. While extremely complex, these challenges are not insurmountable. Nearly 2.5 centuries of American history have proven that a national leadership team, executive and legislative, that puts the best interest of our nation ahead of personal or partisan concerns could surely come together to work through these or any other crises we face. Among the most daunting of these challenges is the sequester that has been so detrimental to military readiness and has broken the link in one of DoD's strongest chains, and that is long-range planning that ties budgets and programs to strategy and threats. Despite last year's bipartisan budget agreement that lessened the sequester's bite a bit, DoD has still absorbed over 70% of the sequester's deep cuts in 2013, 14, and 15, totaling over $110 billion reduction from previous plans. More critically, that agreement did nothing to fix the sequester's full effect that are set to reappear in 2016 and run through 2021. The sequester is accelerating something that I have been concerned about for many years: DoD's ever-shrinking war-fighting forces. There's no doubt we have the finest military in the world. But if we don't make some adjustments, it won't stay that way. I want to focus on two reasons why the world's finest military is at serious risk. The first is the fully burdened and life cycle costs of the all-volunteer force. The second is the worsening of the so-called tooth-to-tail ratio due to DoD's excessive overhead in infrastructure. Let's take the all-volunteer force first. Within the next couple of years, the cost of compensation for retirement and health care for military retirees and their dependents will be greater than the entire $140 billion annual appropriation for the military personnel account that includes all active duty, Guard, and Reserve personnel. The point is, we will be spending more on people who no longer serve than we spend on those who are currently serving. The cost of pay and just some benefits for active personnel has gone up 85% since 2001 for a slightly smaller force than the one we had on 9/11. Healthcare costs have gone up 135%. On-base dependent school costs have gone up 120%. There are those that say, what's the problem? Personnel costs have stayed approximately 30% of the budget. Wrong. The all-in costs of taking care of people are well over 50% of the budget and climbing. The Army and Marine Corps leaders tell us their basic personnel costs exceed 65 to 70% of their budgets. And this does not include the cost of retired pay. We have 2.4 million retirees, contrasted to 1.2 million serving on active duty, and their retired pay alone is $100 billion a year. The retirees and their dependents also consume over 65% of DoD's $52 billion annual health care bill. If you add up the total cost of pay for active and retirees, their health care costs, some veterans costs, and other related costs, it's $417 billion a year. That's about 86% of the DoD budget. And that does not include the $1.1 trillion bill for the unfunded liability in military retired pay and health care that comes due in the next 10 years. That's $1.1 trillion that's in nobody's budget right now. These are clearly unsustainable trends. We know General Motors didn't start out to be a healthcare company that occasionally built an automobile. We cannot let DoD turn into a benefits company that occasionally kills a terrorist. Each of the last 3 Secretaries of Defense has understood the severity of the problem, and every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has joined them. Unfortunately, few in Washington have listened to them, and fewer still have decided to take an active role in solving it. All of the recent debate has centered on protecting benefits and not protecting warfighting. I believe that we need to reframe the issue and dedicate ourselves to educating the people who can make a difference and those who influence them, like you and this audience. NGAUS must make key leaders and decision makers aware that we don't want the choice to be between highly trained and well-equipped riflemen or happy retirees. Terrorists and those who wish us harm are not deterred by a commissary card. We need to get back to focusing on DoD's core mission, which is warfighting. With budgets larger in constant dollars in the peak of the Vietnam or the Reagan buildup, we are clearly not getting the bang for the buck that we should. If you put historic defense budgets in FY15 constant dollars and map the active duty in strength against it, here are numbers any fourth grader can understand. During the Korean War, $600 billion supported 3.5 million troops. In Vietnam, $400 billion supported 2.5 million troops. In Desert Storm, $550 billion supported 2 million troops. Today, $600 billion supports 1.2 million troops. We are spending the same amount today as we did in the Korean War, but that amount supports 2.3 million fewer troops. Accompanying these personnel decreases, we've cut Army divisions and brigade combat teams, retired tactical fighter and attack aircraft, and mothballed combatant ships. Since 1980, active duty personnel have shrunk by 42%, Guard and Reserve are down 35%, Army divisions have shrunk by 45%, active commissioned ships by 46%, and our active fighter attack aircraft inventory down by 53%. And yet, the DoD top line has gone up 30%. So we're spending more and getting less. Under the sequester level, more cuts are coming. The Army is slated to take the biggest hit to personnel in strength, with a decrease from 490,000 today to 420,000 by FY19. The Guard is slated to go from 350,000 to 315,000. These levels are way too low to meet the threats we face. And if we don't reverse the adverse internal trends, our warfighting forces will shrink even further than outlined above. Army divisions will shrink from 10 to 6, Navy ships from 285 to 228, and fighter aircraft from 1,493 to 1,157. Guard maneuver units and combat squadrons could be cut by up to 50%. At these levels, the remaining fighting forces will be too small to meet the threats we face, and at the same time will also be less ready and less capable. This is not just my analysis. Most of the major analytical think tanks, from the left to the right, have agreed for some time that this is the course we're on unless we make fundamental changes. The Independent National Defense Panel, chaired by former Secretary of Defense Bill Perry and retired Army General John Abizaid, just reported the same warning. In my view, this is a compelling case for reform, and one on which the Pentagon, Congress, industry, and all in this room must work together to reverse the ever-shrinking warfighting forces. There is one undeniable way to improve warfighting. That is more, not less, reliance on our very cost-effective reserve component. All of the recent objective cost analyses have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Guard and Reserves are an extremely effective way of achieving operational bang for a much reduced share of the defense buck. After 13 years of responding at home and abroad, we have the most battle-hardened and operationally experienced reserve force in our history. 887,000 Guardsmen and Reservists mobilized to serve on active duty, and 34,000 are currently deployed. Just a couple of examples. The RFPB just concluded a year-long study of the DoD approach to cyber, led by a prominent businessman, Satch Pokori. I've just sent our report to the Secretary of Defense with 4 recommendations on ways to take advantage of the reserve components' significant skill and cost and experience advantages in cyber, because right now, DoD does not include any reserve components in the newly formed Cyber Mission Force. That makes no sense. In our government today, as we try to figure out how to deal with the situation in Ukraine, the top experts in our country with the most relationships, the most knowledge, and the most experience is the California National Guard, who's been Ukraine's state partner for 20 years. And retired Army Lieutenant General Dave Barno of the Center for New American Security just completed a landmark paper on how to increase the use of the Guard and Reserve in this era of fiscal constraint. So there's a lot that could be done there. Let me go to my second reason why our warfighting forces are at risk, and that is DoD's massive overhead and infrastructure, the so-called tooth-to-tail ratio. It's never been good, but it's getting worse. 42% of all DoD spending is for infrastructure. That is over $200 billion, which is larger than the entire economy of Ireland. Defense-wide spending has gone from 5% of the budget in 2001 to 20% today. Secretary Hagel, to his great credit, immediately recognized the imbalances within the department and began a series of corrective steps to include the strategic choices and management review. The 20% headquarters cut that Secretary Hagel directed are very important from both a symbolic and substantive standpoint. But the total number of people working at the OSD, the Joint Staff, the combatant commands, and the defense agencies is over 250,000 people at a cost of $116 billion a year, and nary a trigger puller in the whole lot. And this only scratches the surface in the infrastructure and overhead area, since 75% is in the military departments. So it's an undeniable fact that reforms are necessary. Reforms in pay and benefits, current and deferred. Reforms in a wide array of defense programs, and cuts in overhead and infrastructure. The reserve components must be a part of the solutions, as long as those reductions are well thought out, make good sense from both fiscal and strategic perspectives, and don't diminish our reserve components' value as an operational reserve. The reserve components also have some overhead that could be trimmed. As an example, reserve component administrative headquarters have grown over the last 4 years by 6%. There are 85 reserve component non-deployable headquarters that administer to approximately 840,000 reserve component personnel, and there are over 160,000 full-time personnel supporting the reserve components. As a percent of reserve in strength, the full-time support averages 20%, but goes as high as 36%, with costs that parallel the active force. We all need to ensure that the reserves remain a bargain for the taxpayer. Not only are we decreasing our warfighting forces, we are in some cases quickly and irreversibly drawing down the defense industrial base that provides the technology so essential to our warfighters. In case of an emergency, we can surge training by keeping some part of the force highly trained for no-notice contingency responses and accelerating training for the remainder of the force as required. Our reserve components have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that we can surge personnel. But if we allow our industrial base to degrade, we can't surge equipment. Cutting-edge technology, a discriminator on the battlefield, takes years to research and development. No amount of money can overcome lost time. You cannot go on Amazon.com on Monday, order precision-guided munitions and get them by Tuesday, or helicopters, or engines, or trucks, or radios, or just about any battlefield gear that is displayed here in the industry exhibits. In closing, I need to let you know that the reserve components in general, and the Reserve Forces Policy Board in particular, enjoy a superb level of support from the Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, and the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Bob Work. That support is reinforced every day by the RFPB's sponsor, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Jess Wright, the former Adjutant General of Pennsylvania, and by our new RFPB Executive Director, Major General Walt Lord, also Pennsylvania Army National Guard. Hoorah! As you may know, the RFPB by law is an independent body that provides advice and recommendations directly to the Secretary of Defense, and we don't hesitate to give it. However, we rely on Undersecretary Wright and her office to provide day-to-day support for our full-time staff and to champion reserve component causes within the department. That support has been continuous and unwavering. One of the overarching themes expressed in A Tale of Two Cities is darkness and light as metaphors for evil and good. The darkness of which Dickens writes represents uncertainty, fear, and peril. The light represents hope for the future and a belief that with turbulent times behind us, we can look forward to better times ahead. I'm confident our nation will, with the leaders in this room, deal with the fiscal, political, and social challenges head on, and we will triumph through these worst of times and will set the conditions for the best of times ahead. Thank you for inviting me to join you in this great city of Chicago, but more importantly, thank you for what your soldiers, airmen, and families do in service to our states and our nation, and for your leadership that enables them to serve so well. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Just 1 second if I can get it, okay?
Well, General Punaro, thank you so much for taking the time not only to lead the RFPB and take on these tough issues and make sure that our senior leaders are aware of these issues and potential solutions, but for coming to spend time with us in Chicago. We value it. As a small token of our appreciation, we have a Christmas ornament from the National Guard Education Foundation. That's our National Guard Memorial. We just paid that off. We owed it free and clear. And we have a t-shirt with our Chicago theme here with Jake and Elwood.
Thank you.
To you,
Great.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Will the Sergeant at Arms please escort our distinguished guest from the podium?